Alright, let's talk damage today. Don't mind the coughs, I'm recovering, and let me know about mic quality, how if it's bearable or not. Hopefully I'll be ordering a new mic soon. Um, but today I want to talk about HP. We all know HP, get hit, lose some damage. Pros, it's super simple. Cons, it is a bit vague and ambiguous. Real life, person who takes one hit with an axe. In game, they're taking 57 hits and counting. It's uh, very practical to use for just getting the job done, um, to transfer information, data to the player, but a bit jarring and not very diegetic or realistic. To be fair, I don't care too much about realism. I just I like the idea of things making sense though in your world in the game. Uh, Damage types for types of damage. So like blunt, slashing, burning, freezing, poisons. They're cool and interesting, but it's hard to do it properly. Usually they're not typically fun to keep track of in TTRPGs or really games in general, video games and all that. Um, some games have just a handful of damage types, while others have a myriad, 20 and 20 plus, um, which often leads to players just not knowing any of them and just looking them up, whenever they need to, basically on the spot. Oh, I'm bleeding. What does that do again? Kind of thing. And the dev, I could solve that by, you know, writing next to, let's say the player's getting attacked by giant scorpion, and on the scorpion stat block, I have, the poison type that the scorpion's doing. I could somewhat solve that so the GM can read it out to the player, but in general, it doesn't really solve the problem of the mental workload that the players are having to take to try and remember this information. And let's be honest, like most damage types are really just different ways to damage health. Different, damage, you have like the dot, the damage over time, deals a couple points of damage each turn, unless the player has to do something. Like let's say the player's on fire, it takes 1d4 damage per turn. Player has to roll or douse himself in water or something to stop the burning. Um, and so it's like, okay, it's just instead of taking the damage all at once, the damage over turn, over time. So, is there a way to make it more interesting than just dealing damage to HP? Or I guess the other one is like damage to stamina or mana or something like that. So the system I want, the way how I want to do HP in my system is I want an easily understandable and diegetic way to communicate that a character has been wounded. I want the complexity of called shots, wounded limbs and such. I also want characters to have the capability to push beyond their limits, typically by tools and abilities that circumvent game mechanics. So the simple idea I have is when the PC is injured, the GM can hinder an aspect from the player's character sheet, depending on the circumstance. So for example, a ram bashes its skull against the PC, causing a loud crack, and the PC's clothes to be stained red as a health tonic shatters. Uh, Basically, everything is up for grabs rather than all attacks damaging health points or HP. So everything on your character sheet can be damaged. Now, typically, depending on the type of monster, they will target certain sections of your HP, your character sheet, more than others. So, like a typical goblin would probably attack like your inventory and your HP, versus something like a wraith would attack something like your mana and maybe your memory or something like that. So here I created these very rudimentary character sheets, and so there are, imagine 2 pages, front and back, so for a total of 4 pages, And so these first two are the two back pages. So you have like the player's inventory, yeah, I guess their inventory. So their bulk. So you have like their knapsack, their mount inventory, camp inventory, whatnot. Then you have like their name and title, reputation, renown. You have their Mars or their wounds. You have their rest and respite, the things they could do while resting, or maybe some of the items they have that they can use while resting. And then you have like history and story, so their quests, their triumphs and failures that the player has done throughout their journey. And this is like the inside 2 pages, and these are the pages that the player will be using more often. So here's like your dice that you have active. Like you earn more dice as you quote unquote level up, um, as you perform great feats. You have embodiments. That's like this is like the closest thing to HP, but not quite. It's like a stat slash HP slash a bunch of stuff. So like you need embodiments to equip armor equipment, and the higher tier equipment, the more embodiments you need. Um, Embodiments are also used to equip items, and they're also they're also for boons of strength. And I want to move the boons of strength over here, I think, because I kind of want it all on one page, what embodiments are associated with. But in general, that's kind of how it is here. Over here is like spells. Your spells and abilities would go over here. Your mania is what you'd use to equip spells, and similar, the higher tier spells you need more mana to equip it. You have your active rot dice here, and then your boons of bane. So like boon of strength would be like um, to these boons would be used to like enhance your rolls, make it easier to roll, uh, or outright succeed at certain tasks. But let's say back to damage is if the player takes a hit. Again, let's say it's a goblin, sword strike, boom. Uh, you could just mark off an embodiment slot. But that embodiment slot now if you have no more embodiment slots, you can't perform any more boons of strength or use abilities and whatnot. Um, so you don't want to lose these for obvious reasons. And let's say all your embodiment slots are lost, then the character has like a break. I'm thinking for like each section. Um, let's say the player loses all their rest and respite items or something like that, then the character would have like a break, and that's how I'm thinking the player would get wounds or Mars in this case. So I'd have to like word it properly, but like to give an example, your primary weapon, let's say you have a sword and it has an ability, an armament called dual slash or something like that. And so the player, or sorry, the goblin strikes you with their sword, and instead of you taking embodiment damage, your sword takes the brunt of the hit. You have like this clash moment, and so you have like a scene, and instead of you taking the hit, your sword takes the hit. It takes a durability damage. Now it loses that double slash ability, but you walk away unscathed, or partially unscathed. I would say it like a sword losing ability doesn't quite make as much sense, right? But to say that the character and the sword, excuse me, I got a cough. Sorry about that. I'm gonna drink something real quick. Okay, back to where was I? So, okay, it doesn't really make sense for the sword to lose its double slash ability, right? But to say that your sword blocked it in a way where you took like a wound, but the wound wasn't bad enough to where you lost an embodiment, but it was bad enough to where now you can no longer do the double slash ability, kind of like that. Um, that's what like durability damage to like I don't know your weapon slash armor would be. Like typically a chest can take like a mortal wound or something like that. Chest armament. Usually like the armor itself, like head, chest, legs, whatnot, are like defensive armaments versus the weapons are like offensive armaments. Excuse me. But the once all the defensive armaments, offensive armaments are gone, the character once again would have like a break, and then they would accrue a wound that would actually go on the sheet, a type of mar. So you can see it's diegetic in a way because each um, injury is tied to an aspect of the character. As the character levels up and gains more history, more greater title, greater renown, more items, they would can lose that in battle. Like I can imagine, in general, you know, their camp would be like safe. But let's say the player is at camp and they get attacked by bandits, then all of a sudden their camp items are vulnerable to be attacked. And while that doesn't do damage to the player per se, it they lose their items. And so either it gets destroyed or now the player has to like either not let these bandits escape or track them down to get back their items. I could see like mounted combat. These items would be vulnerable, but maybe now the player has access to like great more abilities or something, depending on what these items are. I'm thinking like what do you call that thing? A lance? Yeah, I don't know. Let's say a player had like a lance that they normally can't use, in combat, but they can use here, and then it does buku damage, but it has a chance of getting injured or broken or stolen or something. Um, oh yeah, like as I was saying, the like a goblin wouldn't attack your mania, but a maybe a wraith would, and so like a wraith would sap like your strength, your boons and banes is away from you, and maybe that empowers them. Actually, probably be something more like a vampire or something, right? I can imagine a vampire taking away like the aspects of a player's stats from their pages and then making it their own, both draining the PC and empowering the vampire. And I think that'd be cool because imagine if like a player has like a unique boon or bane, I don't know, bane of some god or something like that, and then the vampire absorbs that, and then the vampire gains that. I th- that would be again very diegetic, very interesting. Or the players come across some weird creature that like attacks their history or their story in some way that it could be conventional where it literally just saps memory away or something like that, but it could be unconventional where um, you know like the players go back to a village they went to, and all the villagers lost the memory of the players doing that quest because the villagers encountered a creature that drained their memory, and so now the player no longer has that in their story. It could, I think by having it like this, the different types of damage the player can take, now you have it it makes you think about all the different types of mobs and creatures that the player could come across. Like, how would I attack a player's spells out just from rather than just outright I roll a die, they have an encounter, they fight, they lose X, Y, and Z. I can have like all these kind of weird interactions. But I want to try and keep this short. I think I went too long. Oh my gosh. Uh, I hope this made sense. And again, let me know about the mic quality, please. I'm trying to get a new mic soon. But either way, may the weird and wondrous find you well, and have a good evening.